He went out to check the storm shutters and never came back. His boots were found at the back door. The house was locked from the inside. For 8 years, his wife lived alone, haunted by silence. Until one night, while repairing a leak in the basement, she pulled at a loose panel in the wall, and what she found behind it changed everything. The storm rolled in without warning. It was the kind of storm that silenced birds, that made dogs bark hours before the first crack of thunder. In the small coastal town of Weatherby, people knew to listen to the animals. That night, on the edge of town, in a weathered 2-story house surrounded by thick pine trees, Sarah Mallory stood at the kitchen window, watching the clouds swallow the moon. Her husband, Thomas, had insisted on securing the storm shutters himself. "Won't take more than 10 minutes, he said, pulling on his heavy coat, already halfway out the door. That was at 10:07 p.m. She remembered the time because she had just set the kettle to boil. Sarah waited as the wind began to howl louder. Rain pelted the roof in erratic sheets, and the lights flickered. Minutes passed. She called out his name, once, then twice. No answer. She opened the back door and found only his boots, soaked and muddy, sitting neatly on the mat, facing the door, as if he had taken them off to come inside. But he hadn't. The door had been locked from the inside. The next morning, the police searched the property. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints besides their own. No footprints leading away from the house. Only his boot prints leading to the back steps. And then, nothing. It was as if the storm had swallowed him whole. Neighbors speculated. Some said he'd run off, maybe staged it, planned it all. But those who knew him truly knew. Him shook their heads. Thomas wasn't that kind of man. He loved Sarah, he loved his home, and he hated storms. For weeks, Sarah didn't sleep. She'd sit at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at the back door, waiting for a sound. Sometimes she'd think she heard him. A creak on the stairs, a whisper in the hall. But when she checked, there was nothing, just empty rooms, cold walls, and silence. The police file eventually closed, listed as missing, presumed dead. But Sarah never stopped wondering, never stopped waiting. Her life became routine, but muted. She didn't sell the house. She couldn't, because something in her bones told her Thomas never left it, and she was right. But it would take 8 long years before the house gave up its secret. The years passed slowly in the old house on Pine Hollow. Sarah aged quietly. The lines around her eyes deepened, not from laughter but from worry. Years of it. Her hair grayed at the temples, and though friends begged her to move, to start over, she stayed. She told them it was stubbornness. But the truth was deeper. She felt something in that house. Not peace, never peace, but presence. Little things kept her tethered to the possibility that Thomas hadn't vanished without trace, not really. A drawer she was sure she closed would be open. Her keys moved. From the hallway table to the kitchen counter. Once the living room clock reset itself, ticking backward until it stopped at the exact time he disappeared. 10:07. For years, she doubted herself. Maybe it was grief, hallucination. But even grief couldn't explain the draft she sometimes felt near the basement door. Cold, unnatural. A breath from someplace deeper than the stone foundation of the house should allow. The basement was old, unfinished, damp, filled with the smell of mildew and forgotten years. She rarely went down there except to reset the breaker or dig out. A tool. Thomas used to call it his cave. He'd always insisted on doing the repairs himself. When he disappeared, half-finished projects lay abandoned in corners, pipes exposed, walls half-insulated, tools rusting in buckets. Then came the rainstorm. It was early spring, the 8th year since he vanished. That night, thunder rolled in again, almost on the same date, almost at the same hour. The wind howled like it had the night Thomas left, and Sarah, despite herself, stood again at the kitchen window, clutching a cup of tea that had long gone cold. That was when she heard it. A thud. Not loud, but distinct. From the basement. She froze. No wind could shake the basement like that. No rain could thud against the foundation with such precision. She grabbed a flashlight and headed down the creaking steps, every nerve on fire. The air grew colder as she descended, the smell of wet stone stronger. The beam of light flickered across shelves of dusty jars, old crates and stacks of forgotten things. But something was wrong. One wall, the far wall, looked different. It was damp, almost sweating. A leak, she told herself. Probably a broken pipe. But when she got closer, her foot struck something, a wooden panel, loose, set aside as if someone had been trying to open the wall behind it. Her breath caught. The wall was built of stone, but this section had a smoothness to it. Plaster painted the same gray as the surrounding walls. She reached out and pressed her hand against it, solid. Then she saw the crack, hairline thin, running vertically from ceiling to floor, just left of center. It was almost invisible, but not quite. She tapped it. It echoed, hollow. Suddenly, the air felt heavier. A silence fell so complete she could hear her own pulse pounding in her ears. She dropped to her knees and began running her hands along the edges, pressing, searching. Her fingers brushed against something, a small indentation near the floor, like a latch, covered in dust, hidden by time. She pressed it, a click. Then the wall groaned. It opened, not outwards, but inwards, slowly revealing darkness beyond. Her flashlight flickered. Inside, the space was narrow. A passage, barely 3 feet wide, carved into the earth behind the basement wall. The air inside was colder than anything she'd felt before. Cold, like a tomb. She hesitated, heart racing, then stepped in. The walls were rough stone, reinforced with wooden beams, aged, brittle. She walked slowly, her flashlight casting long shadows ahead of her. After about 20 feet, the passage opened into a room, a hidden room, and in that room were signs of life. A chair, a table, a mattress, thin and rotted with time. Empty cans, a food stacked neatly in the corner, a lantern long out of oil. And on the far wall, strange markings, tallies scratched into the stone, counting days or years. Sarah stumbled backward, her breath shallow, her mind reeled. Someone had lived down here, hidden. But how? Why? And more importantly, who? That's when she saw it, a photograph, propped on the table beneath a thick layer of dust. It was their wedding photo, the same one that had disappeared from the living room 8 years ago. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. On the back, written in faded pencil, were the words, "I never left you." The room began to spin. Who had written that? How had he survived down here? Had someone been hiding him? Or had he hidden himself? And if Thomas had been here, where was he now? A shadow moved behind her. She spun around, but the passage was empty. Only darkness remained. Sarah stood frozen in the hidden room, flashlight flickering, heart beating so loudly it seemed to fill the tight earthen walls. The phrase on the back of the photograph echoed in her mind over and over. "I never left you." Was this room Thomas's, a prison, or his refuge? She backed away slowly, her fingers still gripping the photo. Just as she reached the passage, her foot knocked something beneath the table. It scraped against the floor with a metallic sound. She crouched and pulled it out, a rusted tin box, its edges flaking with age. The latch gave way easily with a quiet snap, and inside, wrapped in brittle linen, was a worn leather-bound journal. She turned it over in her hands. It was Thomas's. She recognized his handwriting immediately, small, neat, deliberate. She flipped open to the first page, June 14th. "If you find this, Sarah, It means the house has finally decided to let you in. I don't know how much time I have left. I don't even know if I'm sane anymore, but I have to write this down. Someone needs to understand what happened. Sarah sat on the edge of the cot and began to read. June 14th, continued. The night of the storm, I went outside like I told you, to check the shutters. The wind was stronger than I expected. The trees were bending like they were going to snap. But the strange thing wasn't the weather, it was the sound. It wasn't thunder. Not exactly. It was low, like a hum, a vibration. It felt like it was coming from inside the earth. I remember stepping off the porch, and then everything went black. I woke up in this room. The door was sealed from the outside. There was food, a mattress, water, even a lantern. It was as if someone had prepared this place for me. But I didn't build this. I never knew it existed. And the strange thing is, time doesn't feel right down here. I sleep, I wake, but there are no windows, no clocks. Sometimes days feel like minutes. Other times, hours stretch forever. I hear things, footsteps above, whispers in the walls. At first I thought it was you, but when I banged on the wall, no one came. Then things started to disappear. The photograph, my watch, my journal, the first one, taken, I don't know by what or who, but I'm not alone down here. Sarah paused, goosebumps rising along her arms. She turned to the next page. July. I stopped counting the days. It only made the silence worse. Sometimes I hear laughter, a woman's voice calling my name. But it's not your voice, Sarah. It's older, harsher. I started exploring. The tunnel past the hidden door. It goes further than I thought. At first just dirt and stone, but then I found another room. Smaller, empty. The air inside was colder, stagnant. The walls were marked with symbols, carved deeply like warnings. I don't go back there anymore. Sometimes I think I see someone standing in the dark, watching, always at the edge of my vision. I call out, but they vanish. One night I woke up and the mattress had been moved, 2 feet to the left. I know I didn't move it. Something is playing with me. Sarah's hand trembled as she turned another page. No date. If this is my tomb, then I accept it. But something tells me I was meant to be found, not by chance, but by design. The walls of this house are alive, Sarah. They breathe. They remember. Sometimes I think they built this room themselves, like the house grew a secret to protect or to hide. I still remember your face. It's the only thing that keeps me from slipping. I hope you never find this place, but if you do, be careful. The house doesn't like to be opened. The last pages were blank. Sarah sat in stunned silence, the weight of what she had read sinking deep into her chest. Had Thomas truly been down here all these years? Trapped within reach of their home, slowly unraveling, and why had the room remained hidden until now? She looked around again. Dust lay thick on every surface. The bed hadn't been slept in for years. No recent footprints, no fresh food or water. Wherever Thomas had gone, he hadn't come back here. But then, where was he now? She gathered the journal and photo, tucked them under her arm, and backed out of the room. She closed the hidden door carefully, and it sealed with a soft click, as if it had never been opened. Back upstairs, the house felt colder. The lights flickered, though there was no storm this time, just silence. Sarah placed the journal on the kitchen table and stared at the photograph once more. Thomas had been here, alive, watching, waiting. And now, the house had let her see. That night, she dreamed. She was standing in the basement again. Only this time, the hidden door opened on its own. A figure stood in the shadows, face obscured, arm outstretched. "Sarah," it whispered. She woke with a gasp. The journal was open beside her. On a page she hadn't reached yet, one sentence was scrawled in fresh ink. "You found me. Now find the others." Her blood ran cold. There were others and the house. was just beginning to speak. The sentence on the journal's final page haunted Sarah long after the ink had dried in her memory. "You found me. Now find the others." Others? She had barely begun to process the possibility that Thomas had survived, lived beneath their home, in silence, and vanished again, only to be left with a cryptic message suggesting he was not alone. She reread the entry a dozen times. The ink wasn't faded like the rest. It was fresh. It hadn't been there when she went to bed. It hadn't. Who had written it? The next morning, Sarah returned to the hidden room. Everything was just as she'd left it. The cot, the table, the stack of empty cans, the tally marks carved into the stone. But the journal wasn't there. It was upstairs on her kitchen table. She had no memory of bringing it with her. The passage seemed darker now. The walls pressed in just a little tighter. The air hung heavier, like a warning. But Sarah couldn't stop. She remembered what Thomas had written. "I started exploring the tunnel past the hidden door." She hadn't noticed any tunnel until now. Behind the cot, obscured by a broken shelf and shadow, was another narrow corridor. Its entrance was crude, like it had been dug by hand. She crouched low, squeezed past the shelf and stepped inside. The walls were raw earth, supported by timber beams. She had to duck to keep from hitting her head. The flashlight illuminated. Only a few feet ahead at a time, the silence down there was different. It wasn't empty, it was watching. The tunnel twisted downward, deeper into the earth. The temperature dropped with every step. Sarah's breath became visible in the beam of her light. Eventually, the corridor widened slightly, opening into a small chamber no bigger than a storage closet. And there, carved into the back wall, was a symbol, a circle with a jagged line through it. The same symbol Thomas had described in the journal. The same one he said was carved into the walls of the smaller room. This was it, but it wasn't empty. A chair stood in the center. A rope dangled from the ceiling above it, frayed and old. Beneath the chair was a crate. On it sat a faded manila folder, damp, water-stained, but still intact. Sarah picked it up, opened it carefully. Inside were black and white photos, dozens of them. Faces, some smiling, some not. Men, women, children, all of them posed in front of the same background. A wall marked with the same symbol she now stood before, and at the bottom of each photo, a date. Names were scrawled in shaky handwriting. Some she recognized. Others she didn't. One name stood out: Thomas Mallory, captured June 14th, 2017. Captured. Not missing, not lost, captured. Her stomach twisted. She flipped through more of the photos. The dates stretched back decades. One, labeled Marjorie Kane, 1952, showed a teenage girl with hollow eyes. Another, Eli Weatherford, 1976, was of a man in overalls, staring blankly into the lens. Sarah's hands trembled. What was this place? Who had taken these people, and how had Thomas known? She suddenly became aware of a soft noise behind her, like the brushing of cloth against stone. She turned. No one. But the temperature dropped another degree. Then she saw it scratched faintly into the floor, barely visible unless the light hit it just right, an arrow pointing deeper into the tunnel. Sarah hesitated. Every instinct told her to go back, to call the police, to run, but something stronger kept her rooted. She had come this far. She followed the arrow. The tunnel narrowed again. The air became thick, heavy with moisture and something else. Something like rot. She had no idea how deep she was anymore. The walls were no longer dirt, but smooth stone, like carved granite. It was too perfect to be natural, too precise. She came to another chamber. This one had no furniture, no crates, no symbols, just a single object in the middle. A large, rusted, steel door embedded in the stone. There was no handle, no lock, but someone or something had etched words into its surface. One must stay, for the others to leave. Beneath that, scratched hurriedly and crookedly, almost childlike, were more words. "Sarah, don't open this door." It was his handwriting, Thomas's fresh. The steel was cold to the touch. She pressed her ear to it, and for a moment, just a moment, she heard something. Breathing, slow, labored, not hers. She pulled back, heart pounding. If Thomas had written the warning, then he was still alive, somewhere beyond that door. But the message was clear. He didn't want her to follow. So, what was she supposed to do? Leave him there? Leave the others? The folder, the photos? They weren't just evidence. They were people. Missing, forgotten, possibly still alive. Sarah backed away from the door. The silence behind it lingered like a threat. Her flashlight flickered. She turned and made her way back through the tunnel, heart thundering with each step, unable to shake the thought that something was behind her, just outside the reach of her light. Back in the basement, she sealed the hidden door. Again, it disappeared into the wall like it had never existed. That night, she didn't sleep. The journal remained on the table, closed, waiting. At exactly 3:07 a.m., a new page turned itself. Words appeared slowly, as if written by an unseen hand. "The house is watching. We are waiting. The choice will come soon." Beneath that, one word, scrawled in red. "Decide." Sarah stared at the page until sunrise. Whatever this was, it was far from over. For the next 3 days, Sarah didn't leave the house. She barely ate, barely slept. The word "decide" stared at her from the open journal like a brand on her soul. The pages wouldn't turn again. It was as if the house was waiting for her answer, for her to act. And all the while, the air in the home had shifted. The walls seemed closer, the creaks more deliberate. The silence, sentient. She tried calling someone, anyone, but the phones didn't work. Her cell had no signal. The landline was dead. The power flickered more often. And the worst part? She began hearing voices, soft, almost indistinguishable, like whispers, carried through the floorboards. Sometimes calling her name, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing. Not Thomas's voice. Children, women, strangers. They echoed through the vents and behind the walls, never loud, never clear, but always present. And Sarah knew this wasn't just about Thomas anymore. There were others, dozens, maybe more. And whatever this house had become, whatever it was hiding below, it wasn't finished. On the 4th day, Sarah woke to find the journal missing again. This time, she didn't panic. Instead, she walked directly to the basement, past the dusty workbench, past the broken lamp, and pressed her hand to the smooth stretch of wall she now knew wasn't real. The door opened, without resistance. The house was letting her back in. She descended with purpose. The tunnel felt different. The cold no longer bittered her. The darkness didn't frighten her. She followed the path deeper, past the first chamber, past the crate, past the old steel door with the etched warning. The journal was there, lying in the dirt at the base of the door, but it was open to a page she hadn't seen before. There was no handwriting, just a sketch, a circle with a jagged line through it. Again. But this time, around it were several figures. Stick-like, rough, each one with a single line leading to the center, like spokes on a wheel, and at the very center something else, a black mass, featureless, no shape, no name. Below it was a sentence. "The door is not a prison, it is a gate." Sarah stared. A gate to what? To where? She thought of all the faces in the folder, the names, the dates. Had they all been brought here, trapped or chosen? She looked at the steel door, at Thomas's words. One must stay for the others to leave. And suddenly she understood. This wasn't just a hiding place. This was a system, an ancient one, older than the house, maybe older than the land. Something buried deep, feeding perhaps, or binding something beneath. And all. This time, people had been disappearing one by one, absorbed into it. But why had it waited for her? And why Thomas? Because he had resisted, because he had escaped, or because he had volunteered? The thought shook her. Maybe he hadn't been trapped at all. Maybe he had been trying to contain it, to stop it from spreading. The others were they part of it now? Guardians, prisoners, victims, and was Sarah now meant to take his place? One must stay. The next morning, she packed a bag, just the essentials, food, a flashlight, the journal, the photograph. She didn't write a note. There was no one left to explain it to. No one would believe it anyway. She descended one last time. The house groaned as she walked through it, like it knew, like it mourned. When she reached the hidden room, the tunnel was already lit, lanterns flickering one by one as she passed. The steel door stood open. She hadn't touched it. Beyond was darkness, not just the absence of light, but something thicker, like smoke, like night itself had gathered and folded in on itself. And there, on the other side, she saw him. Thomas, pale, tired, aged, but alive. He didn't speak, didn't reach for her, just nodded once. Behind him were others, a woman in a faded dress, a child with eyes too old for his face, a man missing half his jaw, all silent, all waiting. Sarah stepped forward, one step, then two. The cold wrapped around her like arms. The journal fluttered closed in her hand. She turned once, looking back at the tunnel, at the path that led to the surface, to the house, to the world she knew. She could still go back. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, "I understand," and stepped through the gate. They found the house weeks later. The police report said it looked abandoned, old. The power had long since failed. Most of the furniture was covered in dust, but they found no signs of Sarah Mallory, no signs of Thomas, no hidden door in the basement, just a journal on the kitchen table, open to the first page. The ink had faded almost completely, but one sentence could still be made out. "You found me, now find the others." And beneath it, fresh, written in a woman's hand, "I did.